So there have been people that have literally tried to remove all the water from our planet, which is about as evil as you can get, by the way, and then people who have attempted to completely sever the bonds between people and Pokemon. The evil teams in these games have certainly tried to do some horrific things to the planet and its inhabitants, but none worse than cheering on a young girl in her gym challenge while getting in the way of others doing the same thing. Did I read that right, Collector?
You did read that right. The motivations of the very first evil team, Team Rocket, may have been very simple, but their actions carried such weight that they're still talked about today. Then the stakes have just been constantly world-threatening ever since, until we got to Gen 7. That's where we went from the evil team and their leader wanting to take over, or even end the world, to just being a bunch of rowdy punks. It truly makes me wonder why that's been the case, and really if we can ever expect them to go in the other direction again. What do you think, Prime?
Well, I can think of one thing. My brain is telling me I should take over full control of this video today. I'm gonna be the one editing it, so move over. And welcome to Version Exclusive, Special Prime Directive and Collector Dexter Edition. Today we're gonna look into what has become of the evil teams, and yeah, I will say I do think one day the evil teams will return to what we're used to. Though, I guess to be fair, the 7th and 8th generations did have a little something in them, and we'll get to that. So I guess we could talk about Team Rocket first, because as you alluded to, their whole deal was incredibly simple. Take people's Pokemon by force and just take over the world slowly that way.
Well, I feel as if their plans weren't even that grandiose, as it really felt like they were supposed to be a yakuza type of threat, where they may be influencing the region they commit their crimes in, but not really have much reach beyond that. It kind of just feels like their goal was simply as follows: steal Pokemon, attack anyone that gets in their way, and make money all the while. Giovanni, the leader of the group, would run his organization from the shadows, appearing to be a well-respected member of his community, while in actuality, he was a fiend, taking anything he desired, even if it was others' lives.
Well, I'll say this much. As we know from quotes Giovanni has in Fire Red and Leaf Green, Team Rocket steals Pokemon from around the world, which implies their reach is in a lot more than just Kanto. It comes off to me like there is really a desire to take over the world while not being super direct about it. When you're doing things that help you store up tons of power and money, usually you're not just doing that without a larger goal in mind. I mean, they even went as far as creating Mewtwo, and while they failed to control it, you have to wonder why they even created it in the first place. Well, obviously to add on to their already dominant arsenal in an attempt to take over the world. Team Rocket ends up reappearing in Gold and Silver and their remakes, as well as Crystal of course, and in the remakes you get the chance to hear from Giovanni again. And at one point he flat out says Team Rocket's plan was to conquer the world. You could take that as a retcon, which I completely think is not the case, as I believe they were just clarifying what was already clear in the original releases instead of relying on people reading through the lines. Look at it as spelling it out for others.
Maybe we just differ on our definition of taking over the world, as I do see where you're coming from. I guess when I think of the majority of the villains that have just straight up announced that as their goal, it usually is a bit more upfront and ultimately would come from them destroying the world before rebuilding it, whereas I see Giovanni having wealth and power from the shadows, being yakuza, mafia, or even cabal-like in nature and more indirect. But even with that said, I'd still say Team Rocket's version of ruling the world was far less extravagant compared to every sinister group that came after them, wouldn't you agree?
Oh, sure. Like, Team Rocket definitely has a wide reach, definitely got a ton of screen time and context to the games and whatnot, but their means of doing things and whatever their true end goal is, well, it's nothing quite like what came directly after them. When it came to Team Agua and Magma in the Hoenn region, they literally wanted to change the foundation of the planet, making it either entirely water-based or ground-based depending on the team you're dealing with. That's not just going to affect the way the people of the world live, but it would completely destroy certain Pokemon populations, and of course, make the world easier to take over for the team that caused the horrible Armageddon to take place. We know at least one thing though, whether Rayquaza shows up to stop them or we do it ourselves, Maxie and Archie end up regretting things almost immediately, so their teams, while very capable of causing the end of the world, aren't exactly prepared to follow through on their visions if they end up successful.
At the very least, with both Maxie and Archie, they seem to at least be remorseful for their actions by the time you get to the Delta episode. Although it does make you wonder how they didn't think a lot of their plans through. I mean, they both love the land and sea so much, but how could they not see that it would just result in mass death in either direction? Or perhaps they were aware and they just simply didn't care. It's actually interesting as it depends on which version of the game you play that determines who the evil ones are, as the opposite team seems to be on the side of good in attempts to stop the other one alongside the player character. I will say, the next big bad though certainly was aware of what his actions meant. In fact, it was his main goal. Cyrus tormented the Sinnoh region with his plot of summoning Palkia and or Dialga in order to destroy the current universe and create an all-new one in his vision, which was just very early 2000s edginess of emotions suck, nobody understands me. The really messed up thing with Cyrus is that most of, if not all of his team, were unaware that his plans amounted to them perishing too. Which is awful, but also kinda funny. What, you thought the sociopath with no emotions actually cared about you? That's hilarious.
I mean, I think this is definitely the most screwed up bad guy so far. While there were some grandiose aspirations for Maxie and Archie, and depending on what you want to believe, possibly Giovanni as well, when it comes to Cyrus, he literally hated emotions so much that he went to the devil in an attempt to wipe the universe out. In the franchise, I can't really think of there being anything else that's got that sort of rough JRP edginess to it. However, when you move from the 4th generation to the 5th, now that feels like some JRPG kind of stuff. We've got this whole group of people that, in and of themselves, are like a kingdom. There's a bunch of sages, an edgy trio of teleporters in the shadows, a prince, and even a king. Their plan, of course, is to liberate Pokemon from humans, but really, they just want to make sure people are unequipped to fight back against Ghetsis, who would end up being able to rule over Unova as the only trainer. They even go as far as trying to break into the PC system so they could release everyone's Pokemon. If nothing else, N is able to see he is manipulated by Ghetsis pretty quickly, and this Ghetsis dude sure is crazy.
I did find N's disposition and philosophies on owning Pokemon interesting though, regardless of being manipulated by Ghetsis. It really made me think if it was right to keep Pokemon inside of their Pokeballs. But then I stopped thinking about it because those kinds of introspective thoughts got in the way of my work, especially with my dear friend Prime. However, if we look at the Team Plasma of Black and White 2, there's a whole different story there. Team Plasma split off into 2 branches, the ones that wanted to atone for their sins with N and return the Pokemon they had stolen, and those that were loyal to Ghetsis and wanted to continue their thievery in a nefarious manner in order to help Ghetsis become the ruler of Unova. So pretty much par for the course of evil teams at this point. But I think Kalos' evil team is where we take a turn from sociopathic to psychopathic. Lysander and his Team Flare were truly the most deranged in my opinion. They wanted to recruit as many beautiful people as possible into their group. And why is that? Well, of course, to kill all of the filthy, ugly beings, of course. Lysander wanted to wipe the slate clean and destroy the world, using the ultimate weapon in order to do so. He even wept when bringing up that Pokemon would no longer exist when enacting his plan. But with resources running thin and Pokemon being exploited by people, what better way to fix this issue than by killing all of the innocents?
There is no better way. As a matter of fact, I'm officially signing off on this. Let's kill all the innocents and their Pokemon. Hooray! Maybe then, my brain wouldn't feel so itchy. Huh. It makes tons of sense until you realize that there's really nothing keeping Lysander and his group from also being killed. I mean, when you're acting so ugly anyway, what arbitrary force would deem you to be beautiful? It's all kind of stupid and not well thought out, but in a lot of ways, every team since Team Rocket really sort of just had the thought of destroying everything to take over, whether it be the world or interspecies bonds. Makes you wonder just how scary and screwed up things could get with the 7th generation. The evil team in those games is Team Skull, and they're just a bunch of thugs and punks. They're more so a joke than anything else, being a far cry from generations of world-threatening organizations. Their leader isn't even some guy with crazy ideals or plans. Guzma just failed at going through his island challenge and ended up going down a dark societal path. There's nothing really scary or threatening about that other than the fact that Guzma could literally be just any guy, and is probably the most realistic leader of an evil team so far.
Even though it seemed fairly obvious to the older player base, there was a twist to this evil team, in that they weren't the real evil team. No, that would be the Aether Foundation, and even then, they aren't inherently evil either, causing a lot of problems for Alola and the rest of the world by bringing in creatures from other dimensions? Absolutely. But they didn't have any grand ideals of world domination. Timeline stuff gets a little messy with Sun and Moon in the Ultra games, but it appears that Lusamine just kind of went insane after her husband disappeared while researching the Ultra Beast. So she worked tirelessly on trying to find the creatures that broke up her family, but ended up becoming obsessed with them instead, neglecting her family in the attempts to reach them. A lot of complex human stuff going on here, and quite honestly, some of the best story that Pokemon has ever had.
I really do love the Sun and Moon family of games. I know they get their heat from people, but from their Pokedex to story to writing, it's just a nice set. So that leaves us with one final release that we know for sure about, and that is Sword and Shield. they decided to once again act upon the 7th generation's formula by having a team appear for most of the game called Team Yell, which just cheers on Marnie and messes around with other gym challengers. They're not even evil, they're just straight up super fans and kinda stupid. Now, there does turn out to be a truly evil team, and it's Macrocosmos, which is led by the chairman of the Pokemon League and its company president, Rose. He wants to trigger the Darkest Day in an attempt to provide Galar with unending energy, which is sort of not even all that evil. I mean, it's a horrible way of going about it, but what he's actually hoping to have accomplished from doing so is a fine thing. This is definitely one of the most weird instances of having an evil team in the franchise.
You know, it seems like a good handful of these evil team leaders aren't even truly evil in their hearts. It really feels like a lot of them just either don't have the foresight to see the bad stuff that comes with their actions, or they're just insanely impatient. So now we're here with the 9th generation coming up, and so far it seems like we'll have yet another not-so-evil team in Team Star. Again, just some punks causing some ruckus around the region. I'm always interested to see what their motivations for being delinquents are, but I gotta say, I'm far more curious of who the actual villains will be this time around. Scarlet and Violet have done a tremendous job of keeping things under wraps in this new cycle, so I think we could all possibly be in for a big surprise come the 18th. But will we get yet another somewhat sympathetic and impatient villainous group, or could we just return to seeing pure evil once more?
I'm not too sure where things could go. I mean, it certainly feels like they could go either way, where these Team Star folks are all we really have to deal with, and this whole situation is just lighthearted stupidity. However, I agree with the thought that we're going to once again see a true evil force. Perhaps those in charge of the school aren't all they seem to be? I even look at the professors of these games and can't help but think that one or the other might be a true villain depending on the game version that you're playing. There's a lot to think about as we draw closer to the game's release, and I'm just as eager to find out if evil teams will truly be evil again, or just a gag, followed by a quick threat that turns out to be nothing in an instant.
Well, all of this talk about who's evil and who's not really made me question my own ideals and motives. Prime, am I a bad guy?
Absolutely not. You're a great and brilliant scientist who just so happens to conduct experiments on living things. But you're constantly working toward fixing me at least, which is pretty noble. I can't help but wonder if I'm a bad guy, though. Was this a punishment by a greater power being turned into a Pokemon? Makes my brain itch all the more. Anyway, I can't believe I just edited this entire video without hands. It was awful. I can't wait to do it again.
You know, thanks for the kind words, buddy. You're right. I am a great guy. Who knows? Maybe this is punishment from a higher power. Maybe I'm the higher power. The judge and the executioner. Arceus is dead. Anyhow, you did great, Prime. So, dear listeners, what did you think about today's topic? What direction do you feel the newest generation of Pokemon will take us in? Be sure to let us know in the comments below. And until next time, I'm Collector Dexter.
And I'm the Prime Directive, and we'll see you folks next time.